My name is Greg Graff, and I get to be, or have the honor, pleasure, and responsibility of being your Oregon Brooklyn VFW Post 10272 commander. I would like to thank everybody who braved the cold and the wind to come out and celebrate our commemoration of Veterans Day, for all those who have given the ultimate sacrifice so that we can enjoy the freedoms we have today. And since it's so nice and balmy out, I'm going to make this as quick and painless as possible, but still provide honors for those who have gone on before us. So I get to introduce our special speaker for today. Brigadier General David May received his commission through the Air Force Training School, Maxwell Air Force Base in Alabama in 1996. He has held a variety of command and staff positions at the Wing, Combatant Command, Air Staff, and Joint Force Air Force Headquarters. His staff tours include U.S. Headquarters, Air Force, Pentagon, Cyber Command, Transportation Command, Joint Force Headquarters of the Wisconsin National Guard. Prior to his current assignment as Assistant Adjutant General for Air Force, he was the commander of the Volk Field National Guard Base, Camp Douglas, Wisconsin. And it includes his Combat Readiness Training Center, 128th Air Control Squadron, and 126th Weather Flight. He holds a Doctor of Philosophy degree in Organization and Management from Capella University. Ladies and gentlemen, I'd like to introduce Brigadier General David May.
Well, good morning and thank you. Everything is a little bit more difficult in the cold, so I'm just trying to get my glasses and my fingers moving in the right direction here so that I can address you all properly. But I'd like to first start by thanking your Post Commander Graff for the kind introduction and for the invitation to be here today, and for the rest of the men and women here standing with me. I was preparing for our speech last Memorial Day, and a veteran friend of mine reminded me to be sure to talk about the right thing. He's a retired NCO, and he probably thought, rightly so, that his friend the general needed that reminder. He said to me, keep in mind, Armed Forces Day is for those still in their uniform, Veterans Day is for those who hung up their uniform, and Memorial Day is for those that never made it out of their uniform. So rightly so, today we honor you, the veterans that stood up, raised your right hand, and served honorably. I'm also here today representing the 10,000 men and women of the Wisconsin National Guard, and we thank all of you for being here on this Veterans Day. 103 years ago today, the fighting stopped in what was at that time the deadliest war ever known. Millions of people died on and off the battlefield, and four empires, the Russian, German, Ottoman, and Austro-Hungarian, ceased to be. The First World War changed the world, and it was so horrific that it was believed to be the war to end all wars. That's why the ceasefire, which began at 11 a.m. local time on November 11th, 1918, was originally commemorated. Thousands of soldiers from Wisconsin's own 32nd Division fought on the battlefields of France and Germany until the final moments leading up to the Armistice Day. In the months before, the 32nd earned its now famous symbol that we see all over Wisconsin, the red arrow. After breaking through enemy line, and after breaking through every enemy line that it encountered. The reputation the unit earned in combat during World War I was so fierce that they earned another nickname from the French, Les Terribles, or the Terrible. Before the war's end, the 32nd had fought in 4 major campaigns and sustained thousands of casualties in the so-called war to end all wars. But of course, World War I did not end all wars. In fact, it sowed the seeds for World War II, and the Red Arrow once again played a starring role as it fought in brutal campaigns across the Pacific theater from New Guinea to the Philippines and ultimately Japan. Before war's end, the 32nd had logged 654 days in combat, more than any other division in the war. Along the way, these Wisconsin National Guardsmen suffered thousands of casualties, battled disease, and unbearable conditions, fighting against a determined enemy. Perhaps because the original Armistice Day did not end in a lasting peace, our focus on this day shifted from a historic armistice, which ended World War I, to the men and women who put on the uniform of our nation's armed forces. As much as we long for peace and guard our nation to ensure it, we must always be prepared to bring our nation's might to bear against those who threaten our liberties and those of our allies. 60 years ago, the Wisconsin National Guard's 32nd Division was called to active duty in the Berlin crisis, when the Soviet Union signed a treaty with East Germany. And West Berlin was at the risk of being cut off from the free world. Though the Red Arrow Division was not sent overseas, it trained at Fort Lewis and Fort Irwin and demonstrated the same prowess that earned accolades in World War I and World War II. The 32nd was made part of the Strategic Army Corps, meaning the division was ready for a joint army and air deployment anywhere in the world. The Wisconsin National Guard continued that legacy of service in subsequent generations. 30 years ago, several units in the Wisconsin National Guard were serving in Saudi Arabia. In World War I and World War II, most, if not all, of National Guard units were called up to go to war. That changed in World War II. And especially during the war in Vietnam, the National Guard was rarely seen overseas. After Vietnam, the Pentagon developed a total force concept that included the National Guard as part of its combat units. Military leaders learned their lesson in Vietnam, where it deployed largely without the Guard. They learned that when a Guard unit deploys, it brings Main Street USA, towns like this town, with it, and the support of communities across the nation. As citizen soldiers and airmen, the National Guard is made up of small business owners, farmers, teachers, nurses, plumbers, welders, and so on, who mobilize when their nation calls them to serve. Quite simply, the sacrifice borne by our nation's veterans from all of the armed forces is what paved the way for the freedoms and prosperity we enjoy as a nation today. We may have our differences in this country, but we are truly the most blessed nation in the world, thanks to the service and sacrifice of those who have worn this uniform. In the years since September 11, 2001, another generation of Americans answered the call, this time in places like Iraq and Afghanistan, fighting a war against terrorism. Here in Wisconsin, more than 20,000 Wisconsin National Guard soldiers and airmen deployed to combat theaters around the globe, and virtually every unit in the organization deployed. Even today, on this Veterans Day, hundreds of Wisconsin National Guard members are in harm's way around the globe. Our 135th Medical Company, based in Waukesha, is currently providing medical care in Kuwait and Iraq, while our Sparta and Viroqua-based 107th Maintenance Company is spread across Eastern Europe. Our 115th Fighter Wing out of Madison also recently deployed hundreds of airmen for its final F-16 deployment before the wing transitions to the F-35. And Milwaukee's 128th Air Refueling Wing continues to deploy airmen worldwide in support of global contingency operations. Over the past 5 decades, and certainly over the past 20 years, we have seen generations of veterans who volunteered to wear the uniform. Every generation of Americans has had its citizens who have been willing to serve. They represent the very best of those generations, and we're lucky that such men and women lived. Military service was no longer a legal obligation for people of a certain age, but veterans will tell you that they felt an obligation to serve our nation. Some did so only for a short season, while others made a career of 20, 30, or 40 years in uniform. All are deserving of our undying respect and gratitude as citizens of this nation. It is for this reason that we set aside a day to acknowledge those who put on the uniform and put their lives at risk for the sake of our country. Not to glorify war, but to honor those who put their country and their fellow service members ahead of themselves. Because deep down we recognize and appreciate the values and qualities that our veterans possess. Those values and qualities built our nation nearly 225 years ago, and they keep our nation going strong and free today. Thank you for honoring this day and for allowing me to be with you for this very special occasion. Thank you.
At this time, we are going to honor those who have bravely gone on before us, and the reason we have this ceremony today. Our most senior member of VFW Post 10272, Mr. Gene Stegeberg, has the honor of placing our flag. So if everybody wants to, if you have your hats, you can remove your hats if you want to, and we'll have our laying of a wreath. Mr. Stegeberg, lay the wreath. Sergeant at Arms, prepare.
Color guard, rifleman, tent, hut, port, arm. Rifleman, prepare to fire. Aim. 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 Port, arm. Present, arm. Port arm. Order arm.
Again, I would like to sincerely thank everyone who came out and braved the weather. As you go about your day, not only just today, but always when you see veterans, please thank them for the service because they don't always get recognized. I would also like to thank members of the American Legion Post 160 from Brooklyn, Oregon for helping support our event here. And this concludes it. Thank you for coming out.